What's good? It's Woog. I just wanted to give some early thoughts on this apparently upcoming, Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 3 fight. Since all hell broke loose due to the arbitrator's decision to force the Fury versus Wilder 3 Trilogy match, basically entitling Wilder to the rematch, instead of getting the major unification, undisputed, all four belts on the line fight that we thought we were going to get with Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua, it looks like instead we're getting Fury versus Wilder 3 on this side, and then Anthony Joshua, presumably, against one of his mandatory challengers, the undefeated Oleksandr Usyk, former undisputed cruiserweight champion. And both fights are fantastic, but boy, talk about taking the air out of the ball with all of the anticipation and all the talk we've been getting from both sides about this huge Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury showdown taking place, right? Probably the most exciting possible heavyweight fight since people were talking about Wilder versus Joshua when they were both undefeated. Remember how big that was supposed to be? Never came through, at least not to this point. But I wanted to take a moment and think about this Fury versus Wilder 3 fight. We all know what happened in the first fight. The major consensus that, Fury boxed the pants off of Wilder, and Wilder scored 2 major knockdowns, especially in that 12th round. And although we thought going into the scorecards it was going to be a decision win for Tyson Fury, the judges ruled it a draw. So a disputed, controversial draw. And then in the rematch, we got a full-blown destruction of Deontay Wilder at the hands of Tyson Fury. He basically switched his tactics up a bit. Instead of fighting on his back foot and working behind the jab in the same way that he was working behind the jab against Vladimir Klitschko, not just coming forward and pushing the issue with power punches, but more so outboxing, sweet science, hit and not get hit against Wilder the first time. Second time, no, he came forward and he was feinting just to deliver jabs and straight right hands and really just putting his weight on Wilder, roughing him up, and it was a very brutal TKO beatdown. Wilder's corner, Mark Breland, famously threw in the towel, which led to Mark Breland's firing, although he was simply acting as, a fiduciary of his fighter, Deontay Wilder. He cared enough about him to throw the towel in, because anybody watching the fight saw what was happening, and we even saw, decreased power from Deontay Wilder's punch, because of how much he had gotten beaten down and just pressed on and pushed around and headlocked and just all types of maiming, basically, that would decrease somebody's abilities going forward into the middle and late rounds. So one thing that I feel is somewhat under-discussed, everybody's been talking, obviously, about the crazy and bizarre excuses that Wilder has made since the fight, right? Everything from his costume, 40-pound costume, wearing on his legs before the fight, to, his trainer, Mark Breland, double-crossing him by poisoning his water bottle, to Tyson Fury coming in with loaded gloves. It's been a lot to digest, hearing these things from the Wilder side, which really kind of has you questioning what he believes to be true and if he's actually internalizing these excuses going into this third fight. Now, what I feel has been under-discussed, it's not, the fact that Tyson Fury is an ultra-skilled heavyweight who just happens to be 6'9" and 260 plus pounds and, can also box technically, which is, a unicorn, right? In terms of rarity in what you're going to get in combat sports. But Tyson Fury brings that to the table. And now with the extra tutelage of Sugar Hill Stewart in the Kronk Gym, Sugar Hill is the nephew of famed super trainer Emmanuel Stewart, the late Emmanuel Stewart. Well, now that he's with this camp, it seems like he's, utilizing his more aggressive and destructive tools as much as he is the sweet science and technical tools. And not to say that Kronk Gym isn't technical. They trained up everybody from Thomas the Hitman Hearns to Vladimir Klitschko, Lennox Lewis, and several others. But it seems to have made Tyson Fury that much more dangerous, where he's not just winning rounds. And, I mean, he had stopped Derek Chisora in the rematch several years ago, so it's not like Tyson Fury doesn't score KOs and TKOs, but this just appears to make him use his power punches in a different way. So the thing that I do think has been under discussed are the weights between the two fighters here. You know, generally throughout his career, Deontay Wilder has come into fights at like 213, 215, up to maybe 220, 222, 224. Fury has been a 240 to 250, 260. He's a big guy. Well, for Wilder versus Fury 2, Fury came in at like 15, 20 pounds heavier than he did in their first fight. For the rematch, he came in at 273 pounds. That was his weigh-in weight. So I don't know exactly what he was the night of, but when he weighed in on the scale, he was 273, and Deontay Wilder weighed in heavier than he'd ever weighed for a fight before. He weighed in at like 231 pounds. Very heavy for Deontay Wilder. So I don't think it was any costume that he was wearing coming into the ring that took away his legs. You know, besides Fury's pressure, again, Fury was putting that 270 plus pounds on him, which is going to zap at anybody's energy, especially if you're outweighed by him, you know, 30 pounds, 40 pounds, that's going to wear on your legs. But I think that it was Wilder holding and carrying a weight that he never carried before in those extra few pounds. I mean, to those watching this video, have you ever fluctuated in weight, even if it's just a few pounds, and noticed a difference in what it feels like, you know, exercising, going on runs, you know, walking up and down long flights of steps, playing hoop, basketball? Like, you notice how different you feel when you're 10 pounds heavier versus 10 pounds lighter. So how does that play if you're boxing a scheduled 12 rounds against a guy who's already outweighing you by 30, 40 pounds, who's then going to be putting that weight on you in a way that he wasn't putting that weight on him in their first fight? So I think that Wilder coming in uncharacteristically heavier did him more harm than good. I mean, Wilder's chances to begin with are basically, you know, a puncher's chance, right? So you're not going to outbody the guy. You're not going to just work him over in the clinch and all of a sudden, you know, because Wilder's got pretty skinny legs. So he's not going to be locking horns with Fury and then just pushing Fury back to the ropes, putting Fury in headlocks. I just don't see Wilder implementing that type of a strategy. So I don't see how that additional weight was supposed to serve him well. Now, that brings me to the other thing that's troubling for Wilder coming into this third fight, and that's the inevitability that in the heavyweight division, you don't have these incrementally tiered weight restrictions. So unlike, you know, 140, where you could be anywhere between 135 and 140 generally, or 147, where you could be anywhere up between, you know, 140 and 147, there's much more variance in the heavyweight division. And yes, they are creating this bridger weight between the cruiserweight and the heavyweight division. We'll see how that goes. But basically, you could just, you know, just totally blow weight, come in at 270 something pounds. You know, the UFC has a heavyweight division, anything above 205, but at least they put a restriction on it. Like Brock Lesnar would have to, you know, lose weight to make the 265 weight limit. But in boxing, they just let you do your thing. So, I mean, that really has to be acknowledged, that you're dealing with guys who could have a variance of like 50 pounds. Like, you thought a 10-pound difference was an advantage to one fighter. Imagine fighting somebody, you know, 30, 40 pounds heavier. You know, and I know that like in the UFC, in the early days before they started breaking things down into weight classes, you would have like a 170, 180-pound guy kicking a heavyweight's ass every now and then. But, you know, generally, yeah, if somebody's going to be weighing 40 pounds more than the other guy and they're not like out of shape, they're in shape. You know, Fury was obviously in shape when he destroyed Wilder in that second fight. So you've got this skilled guy who already has the technical advantage over you and weighs, you know, 30 to 40 pounds more than you. That really needs to be considered. And that's what, that, you know, is one of the things that still has me leaning Tyson Fury in the third fight. I'm going to do a proper breakdown and proper preview analysis vid on the fight as we near the date. Once the date is set, we believe that it's going to be either in July or August. It has to happen by September according to the ruling. But the weight issue, it's like Deontay Wilder might have a punch bigger than anybody's in the heavyweight division. I don't care if the guy weighs 250, 260. Nobody hits as hard as Deontay Wilder's right hand, even if Deontay Wilder weighs about 225 or something. But that doesn't mean that his legs can absorb a 250-pound punch. He might be able to drop a bull with the power of his punch, but that doesn't mean that he could take the bull's incoming fire. It doesn't mean that his legs and hips are equipped, or his back is equipped to absorb that type of shock, or his chin, his neck is a 250-pounder's neck. No, he's a skinnier dude who just happens to have otherworldly power, and he's tall as all hell. He's obviously 6'7", but you look at his structure, his neck, his back, my neck, my back. So that's one of the things that make me have trouble seeing how Deontay Wilder is supposed to come out on top here. Is if Fury can keep from getting blasted, because that's always the possibility. That is the thing. So if Deontay Wilder is unable to, drop him in the first, drop him in the second, or drop him in the third, and this fight goes on, we're assuming now that Deontay Wilder is going to be losing just about all of the rounds, because Deontay Wilder hasn't, established himself as being a tremendous round winner, right? We know that Tyson Fury, like, say Devin Haney, is somebody who doesn't need to get you out of there to win the fight. They could win round after round after round. Deontay Wilder, earlier in his championship, run, basically when he won the title against Stavern in their first fight, he showed some of that sweet science. He was fighting a little bit off his back foot, moving around, and actually won rounds and won the fight via decision, captured the WBC title. And this is when Stavern was still a good fighter. But it seems like more recently, in the fights with Luis Ortiz, for instance, Deontay Wilder has become more increasingly reliant on scoring the nuclear bomb. So Deontay Wilder's path to victory just seems to get more and more narrow as you look at this fight between him and Tyson Fury, this trilogy fight. Now, what is kind of giving me an idea of how Wilder can score that knockout is because you've got to really wonder what Tyson Fury's motivation level will be going into this fight. I mean, it looks like he's clicking on all cylinders, right? I mean, he famously took the long 2-3 year sabbatical from boxing, started doing a lot of drugs, alcohol, blew up to like 400 pounds, just out of the ring for multiple years, self-admittedly suicidal. And so we know that Tyson Fury has these mental health challenges that make you wonder how consistent his behavioral patterns will be in terms of preparation, healthy living, just everything that you would want leading into a major fight. So we believed him to be extremely motivated for this Anthony Joshua battle for undisputed. I mean, because he's trying to make history here. But now he's got to circle the wagons and then redirect his energy and his motivation to fighting somebody that he's already fought twice, and you could argue should have beaten twice, even if he was only rewarded the win for one. I'm just saying there's a chance here that he comes in not as sharp as he was for the second fight, as prepared and motivated as he was for the second fight. So I see that as being a kind of an outside-ish possibility, but all things being equal, if they were the same in terms of mindset going into this second fight and same levels of preparation, depending on what the weights are, I would advise Deontay Wilder to come in at less than 231, less than he came in for this second fight, more, what he's been, 222, 225, unless his body, as, he's 33, 34 now, is just naturally growing and putting on that additional weight, which is a huge possibility. We see a lot of slimmer people start to pack on a few more pounds as they age, which, I mean, it still wouldn't bode well, in my opinion, for Deontay Wilder. I mean, it might help a little bit just in terms of punch absorption if he's naturally starting to get a bigger neck and, you know, bigger legs and stuff like that. But in terms of mobility, in terms of stamina, agility, the different things that would allow for him to be able to detonate and set up, properly set up the right hand, you know, hopefully he could get more active with his jab if he wants a chance at, you know, not having this single point of failure being your bomb of a right hand. Maybe he can jab a little more. Maybe he can work on a jab to the body. We'll see how his training with Malik Scott has been, you know, developing. I don't think you could just change your spots overnight, you know, between one fight and the next and become a totally different guy. You know, you could say that, well, what about Tyson Fury in the rematch? Well, he already had those things in him. We've seen him do things like that in the past. So Deontay Wilder, for him to, you know, grow his game in a more sophisticated way, I don't see it taking a dramatic turn. It's more or less a thing about how do you want to be able to set up your power punches, right? And how do you want to keep from totally getting outclassed and schooled in the moments that you're not letting your right hand go. You can't let Fury take control in the way that he took control early in that second fight. So these are just different things that I'm looking out for. Let me know about what your thoughts on the fight. First of all, what's your level of enthusiasm for this new configuration of the heavyweight landscape where it's going to be Fury versus Wilder 3 and then Joshua versus Oleksandr Usyk? And also, how do you see Fury versus Wilder 3 playing out? Do you see it more or less playing out in the way that it played out in the second fight? You know, Fury sounds pretty hell-bent to destroy Wilder, talking about cracking skulls and opening skulls. And I do know that online, this is one of the more polarizing topics where you see a lot of emotional engagement on both sides when discussing, you know, even the last fight and all the controversies, or, you know, some would say non-controversies, but some are trying to make them controversies that are going along with the fight. I know that this is kind of a lightning rod in terms of getting people to be arguing on social media about, you know, what they feel has transpired up until this point and, you know, who's better and just everything to come along with it. But yeah, please share your thoughts on what you think is going to take place in this third fight and how you feel, you know, about the whole arbitration and the fact that it did kind of reshuffle the deck. Look, I think that Wilder was well within his rights to exercise his rematch clause if the arbitrator saw fit. And if he doesn't want to take the step aside money, you know, Fury says he's going to punish him for it. Okay, well, we'll see in the third fight, right? But I don't think that we should be knocking Wilder for exercising, you know, his right to a third fight if he truly believes that he's got a shot at winning this thing. I mean, what are you in the fight game for? So yeah, I wanted to see Fury versus Joshua. That's a very interesting showdown. But, you know, I'm not mad at this Fury versus Wilder 3. I do think that it's a dangerous proposition for Wilder to have exercised this clause. I think that maybe he would have been better advised to take 10, 15 million if, you know, if they were willing to truly offer that, and then fight maybe a Robert Helenius or some other tall guy who's not going to kill you. You know, maybe Chris Arreola, but no better than that. Nobody who's got a close to 50 shot at beating you. I wouldn't fight Andy Ruiz as your tune-up, you know, to stay busy while Fury and Joshua do their thing. But here we are, Fury versus Wilder 3. Please leave your comments in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.